have this on the horse tracking on the pivot, so hopefully it gets me in the picture. But I thought what I would do today is a quick video on what's called the point of balance and how it relates to weight distribution and force distribution in a body. And I'm putting this on the playlist called Wexford Training Barn because what I'm doing on the back of a horse is hard to see. It doesn't look like much. So I thought I would do a quick video on what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Because if I do my job correctly, you can't see what I'm doing, and it looks like I'm just walking a horse around as I'm restoring functional coordination, ideal balance, balance coordination. So I thought I would just explain it a little bit, and then I'll talk about it when I ride both Rafalco and Hercules. And then I'll also put this video on the playlist on my YouTube channel called Horse Geeks Classroom, because it's a little bit of theory behind why I ride the way I do, why I train the way I do. So we've all learned at a certain point where the center of mass is on a horse. So mass is just the stuff that makes up a body. We have mass, horses have mass, right? Weight is actually the force of gravity acting on the shape of the mass. So depending on the shape of the mass. So for example, I'm just going to I pulled out my kind of rickety muck fork that I use in the arena. And this is a good example. This is a non-living mass. And the shape of the mass, right, I have tines at the bottom and a long handle. So it's kind of meant to be useful in this vertical direction. If I want to balance the muck fork, right, horizontally, then the center point of the mass from the tines to the tip of the handle is about there. But if I hold it here horizontally, I have to increase a lot of muscular force resisting sort of the force of gravity on this end, right? So I have to put a lot of effort into it. I have to really grip with my hand, hold my arm to keep this mass horizontally level over gravity. But if I find the point of balance, which isn't necessarily the center of mass, the point of balance is closer to the tines than it is the midpoint of the length. So here, I can balance this muck fork on 2 fingers because this is where the point of balance is for this particular shaped mass and how gravity acts on it. So the point of balance is the center or the axis or the fulcrum or whatever you want to call it. It's a specific point where the weight and force are equalized. So in a living body, this point can sort of move, which gets more complicated. I don't know if I'll explain that today. But on a static mass, this is the point of balance where it feels effortless to keep this tool horizontal because I'm at the midpoint of the weight or the midpoint of force. So that's what the point of balance is. And a horse is sort of built like a muck fork, right? So they're heavier in the pelvic thigh bone throughout the rib cage or the barrel, and they're lighter boned through the front legs, neck, and head. So their center of mass, the center between the nose and the tail, is going to be about here, right in front of the rider's thigh. But how they equalize weight and force, their point of balance, kind of like the muck fork, is farther back. Their point of balance is actually directly under where we sit. So the point of balance is kind of between the forelegs, and they need more weight on this end to balance the mass on this end, right? Just like a muck fork. So when we play with the point of balance, which is what we actually straddle, and we can feel it like a little bubble of pressure, because if in a living body I'm at the center, but there's more weight here, I have to increase muscle tone, increase force through the muscle to compensate for the force of gravity pulling more on this end. That's what horses have to do because they have a long neck and a heavy head that sort of is carried way out in front of the torso. So that's why they're kind of like this muck fork, right? So their center of mass is here, but their point of balance, which we can think of as the center of equalized weight, in 3 dimensions, by the way, but we're just talking front back. But the center of equalized weight, that fulcrum is here, right? Right under our seat bones, ideally. So that's where the front half and the back half of a horse equalize weight, right? So if their point of balance, if they're dysfunctionally coordinated, that point of balance can sort of shift. So if the weight goes here, right, then they increase force here to compensate. If we put weight here, then the front end lifts. So when a horse, and I'll use a whip as a demonstration because bodies also bend, but this is the idea of a horizontal plane through the body, kind of like a teeter-totter, right? So when we find the point of balance and stabilize it, yes, balance is kind of effortless because the weight is equalized on unequal sort of mass front to back, right? So we'll take the muck fork out. And now we'll look at kind of the same idea with just a riding whip. I know, thank you. Okay. Can you back up and go sideways so the camera stays with us? Thank you. Okay, so on any riding whip, most people hold on to the handle, right? Because it has a handle. But what that does is it's not the point of balance for the whip. And so it causes the rider to tighten the arm when they hold the whip at the handle. On any riding whip, if you turn it horizontally, right, you can find where can I balance the whip on 2 fingers? Where can I equalize the weight of this particular mass? And it's right about there. So if I hold the whip here, I don't have to tighten my arm because it's more balanced over gravity. If I hold the whip here, I have to tighten my arm because it's not inherently balanced over gravity. So that's a point of balance on a whip. So if we sort of use this same idea, I know, turn sideways because we're doing front back balance. If we sort of use the same idea, here's the center of the whip, right? But it wants to pull that way, right? So the point of balance is closer to here, right? So if the weight tips forward like that, that would be a horse on the forehand. And because this plane bends, when a horse's weight is too far forward, they can bend the neck upward or shorten the neck muscles or even curl the neck like that to try to compensate for the unequal weight distribution between the front legs and the hind legs, right? So when horses drop the back, right, it creates a side-to-side movement. And we know they're dropping the back because the neck muscles are either shortening up or the neck muscles are shortening and pulling the head into the chest. That's how we know that the actual torso weight is here. So they do that or they do that. In long and low, the spine is now congruent and we see the weight on the forehand. This is kind of the posture of long and low. So from long and low, when we lift the back, what we're doing is asking the horse to put more weight, kind of on the short side, in order to lift the long side. So we're playing with this point of balance. Let me find it again, right? And when the weight is equalized, which means there's a little more weight from this short side. So from my seat bones to his tail is like the short end of the mass. And from my seat bones to his nose is the long end of the mass. So if I don't have the weight equal, right, the longer side is going to tip towards gravity. That's why horses overload their front end very easily. And if they overload the front end too easily, they can compensate by bending the neck up or curling it backwards. That's a dropped pole, roll cur, all of that stuff that's supposed to lift the back is really just a compensation for the weight being too far on the long side of the teeter-totter. So when I play with the point of balance, and when we're working on lifting the back, engaging the hindquarters, the purpose is to stabilize this fulcrum point, which is under the saddle, not by the shoulder. And as they learn to carry weight and resistance through the barrel and the hindquarter, that's what elevates the front end. So that's what I'm working on, is really this tiny point of balance. We can feel it, it's subtle, but if we're stable through our axial skeleton, through our skull, spine, and pelvis, and we're balanced over gravity, which is below the movement of the horse, then what we feel in the saddle are little bits of pressure that shift around. So if the point of balance for the horse is never going to move outside of any seat of a saddle. It basically is going to live somewhere in here, but it can move. So if the weight tips, say, forward, then the muscles from here to here are going to have to excessively increase force or the horse would fall over. So if weight tips forward, I'm going to get muscular tension on the backside, right? So I'm going to feel that in the saddle as excess pressure at the back half of the saddle compared to the front half of the saddle. If he shifts his weight forward and to the left front, then I'm going to feel the muscles tighten and create an upward force on the back right quadrant of my saddle. So what's important to know about that is that if weight becomes unequal, his body weight, if it's unequal or where it shouldn't be, front to back, then the muscles tighten in the back to equalize the excess weight up front. If the weight tips to the left set of legs, then the right side of the body is going to tighten the muscles or he would fall over. So the weight tips left, muscles tighten right. Weight tips forward, muscles tighten behind. Weight tips forward and left, muscles tighten back and right. Right? That's kind of how the point of balance is like an instant center of rotation that's always equalizing weight and force, especially if we're dysfunctional, in a dysfunctional coordination. So that's why we can do that, have bad coordination, and yet not fall over, and still do, he went to pre-St. George level of dressage, but he developed navicular on the right front, which tells me there was too much weight on the right front, which also tells me not enough function or too much tension on the back left. So that's what I work on when I ride, is equalizing the weight distribution by working at the fulcrum of a three-dimensional teeter-totter, which is his body, until he can figure out how to get his weight in the right place. I can assist him by putting my weight wherever I feel that upward force of muscular tension. Because if I feel that upward force of muscular tension in the back right, I know the weight's going forward left, but I can't really lift the weight off the forward left. What I have to do is add my weight back and right. So the boat's about to tip this way, we don't go with it, we put our weight to the opposite side of the boat. Makes sense when it's not a living body, but it's the same in a living body. So that's what I'm doing when I'm riding. And if I do it accurately with every little weight shift he makes, or as he changes his coordination, I don't look like I'm doing anything. Internally, I'm shifting weight and changing muscle tone all the time based on what I'm feeling as a small point of pressure somewhere in the saddle. Then I can play with different paths of travel, different exercises to encourage a change in coordination, but I can't really do it for him. All I can do is resist the forces of imbalance, those are my aids, and guide him on a path of travel or through transitions or speed adjustments in order to help him discover a better coordination or restore function to a leg that's sort of been detoured around for a while, which was his left hind leg. And then as he developed, we no longer have any lameness on the right front leg, but because he was so tipped forward for so long with his weight, we have a lot of weakness through from here to here. You can see his hindquarters a little sunken in, not quite round, his back a little tight. All of that is a lack of muscle development from a lack of function. So if we don't get the weight right, we don't get the mechanics right. If we don't get the mechanics right, we don't get the muscle development right. That's kind of how it works. So when I work with him on my weight distribution to keep balance, I'm affecting his weight distribution, but he's also got to figure out how to change his coordination. That's way too complicated for a person, any person, to actually do. So that's what I'm doing in training when I'm riding them, and it doesn't look like much. So I'm taking the time to explain it because it's not the way we're trained to ride, and it doesn't make a very exciting video. That's also why I got a microphone and I talk about what I'm doing, because you can't see it and it doesn't look too exciting. But it's hard, and changing coordination, I'm doing that to restore soundness, to restore a sense of safety for the horse internally, which comes out as calm, concentration, and cooperation. And the horses love it because we're talking about how they're using their body throughout all of training. And it should lead to increased athletic capacity, better movement, and all of that. But the process of it is a little tricky. It can be hard to navigate your first time through. And so I try to explain what I'm doing with each horse in training as I go. So that's it for this video, but in the next few training videos, like when I ride Rafalco or Hercules, Rarely Wrong is still doing work on the ground, and Lexi under saddle, I'll explain a little bit more about what I'm feeling related to the point of balance and related to where I'm putting my weight and why, and how I'm resisting muscularly that you can't see, but he can feel and I can feel. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I think we'll stop this video here and then get to the training ride.